Starting off this countdown, we have Finding Nothing. And by this, I'm referring to the Disney Pixar movie Finding Nemo. Theory goes that Nemo is actually dead. Sadly, he didn't survive the attack at the beginning of the film that killed his mother and siblings. The whole movie is actually about a father trying to come to terms with the death of his wife and kids. As a result, Nemo is a figment of his imagination. Now, all the pals that we see along the way are all trying to help Marlin cope with his grief, whereas Dory is said to be his psychiatrist helping him along his journey to acceptance. In fact, the movie shows the 5 stages of grief. First, we have denial, which we can see by Marlin always babying Nemo and not wanting him to go to school. Then we have anger, which was when he got mad at Nemo for swimming out too far. We got bargaining, which was his entire journey across the ocean. Depression, which was when he almost reached Nemo and then he saw him getting flushed down the toilet. And then finally, acceptance, coming to terms with the loss of him. In fact, Nemo in Latin means nobody or nothing. So the name literally translates to finding nobody. In our 9th spot, we have the secret villain. According to this next theory, the real villain of Toy Story 2 is none other than Wheezy the Penguin. Yeah, that's right. In the movie, Woody finds Wheezy all dusty and alone on Andy's bookshelf. For years, he had been severely neglected by Andy, all because he has a broken squeaker. As a result, he became very jealous of all the other toys that Andy loved to play with, especially Woody. Therefore, Wheezy decided to include himself in the yard sale, knowing that Woody would try and come to his rescue and hopefully be sold in the process. It was his scheme all along to try to get rid of his competition and become Andy's #1 favorite toy. Moving on to number 8, we have the pathological liar. Who am I referring to? Cinderella, of course. The story of Cinderella is told from her perspective, but others claim that her stepmother and sisters aren't as sinister as she makes them out to be. In fact, this theory takes a look at it from their perspective. So Cinderella was a young girl from a wealthy family. She was very privileged and never had to do any chores. When her stepmother came into her life, she was trying to teach Cinderella that she can't ride on her privilege and her family's wealth. So she gets her to start helping around the house by doing household chores. But since Cinderella has never done any chores in her entire life, she feels like she's being punished. And she makes everything more dramatic than it actually is. So she acts like she's doing really cruel chores. Then her sisters seem evil since they are living in a house that's rightfully hers. So the whole movie is about Cinderella overreacting to every little thing, simply because she has a poor work ethic. In our 7th spot, we have the evil nanny. Mary Poppins may be a little stern at times, but she only has the best intentions, right? Or does she? According to this theory, Mary Poppins is the master at manipulation. She may seem practically perfect, but in reality, she is a cruel demigod that is trying to gain control of the entire human race. I mean, she definitely has superhuman capabilities, like, hello, her endless bag of stuff, or the fact that she can fly with an umbrella. Now, her plan begins by infiltrating families and getting them to conform to her ways. All the families end up blindly following her ways. We see that she has mass admirers and devoted followers. She is slowly but surely taking control over families so that they will always do what she says, and she can end up ruling the world with a loyal following. In our 6th spot, we have Up to Heaven. The Disney Pixar movie Up has one of the saddest beginnings in Disney movie history. It's a real tearjerker. The only thing worse than that might be this theory. So according to this theory, Carl died in his sleep shortly after his wife passed away. The adventure he goes on through the movie is his journey to the afterlife. I mean, he literally is in his balloon house floating up to the sky, aka towards heaven. Russell is his guardian angel trying to make sure that he gets to heaven unharmed. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with The Purge. This one has got to be one of my personal favorites, just because of how outrageous and hilarious it is. So we all know the movie High School Musical. I mean, it's a movie that defined my childhood. To this day, I still have every single song memorized. And yes, I brag about that, okay? Those songs are everything. Anyway, this theory suggests that High School Musical and The Purge exist in the same universe. I know, but how else can you explain how the students get away with trashing the cafeteria, or how Lava Springs in the second movie didn't get shut down, or how Miss Darbus got away with forgery by applying to Juilliard on behalf of Troy? Seriously, none of their actions have consequences. You know where else you can get away with anything? on the purge night once a year. Just saying, just saying. Making our way down the list at number 4, we have the hallucinations. Let's move on and take a look at Alice in Wonderland, shall we? Whether we look at the book or the Disney movie adaptation, it seems like the theme of drug use is always apparent. This theory states that Alice is a drug addict that would go on crazy trips. In fact, it is said that the author Lewis Carroll was an opium user. It was rumored that he was on drugs while writing this book. So in the Disney movie, we have the caterpillar that is constantly taking hits from his pipe. We have Alice who drinks potions and eats mushrooms and other edibles that have different effects on her body, quite literally, and the whole movie is filled with crazy characters and events. So the White Rabbit is the alias that her drug dealer goes by. He says, "I'm late for an important date," meaning he's gotta be on time for all these drug exchanges. The theme of madness present throughout the film highlights how dangerous the effects of drugs can have on you and how it can cause you to spiral into madness. In our third spot, we have The Gruesome Murder. The Emperor's New Groove was actually a really good movie. Like, it deserves more attention. Like, Yzma and Kronk are an iconic duo. Now this theory shows how evil Yzma actually is. In fact, it's thought that Cusco isn't the first human Yzma has turned into a creature. So in one of the scenes, Cusco ends up wandering into a scary looking jungle. While doing so, he witnesses a fly trapped in a spider web. The fly says, "Help me," right before being viciously eaten by a spider. Well, isn't it quite weird that the fly had the ability to talk? I mean, Cusco interacts with several other animals in the movie and none of them can talk, except this fly. So this has led people to believe that that fly was actually a human that Yzma then turned into a fly, meaning that that scene is much darker than we realized. It's the human's last moments of life. In our second spot, we have the deathbed. According to this next theory, Snow White may not have had a happy ever after. So in the film, we see that Snow White is woken up by her true love's kiss. But in reality, the prince is the personification of death. Snow White was laying on her deathbed. The prince's kiss was actually a Dementor's kiss that sucked the last little bit of life out of her, meaning she actually ends up dying at the end of the film. She then wakes up and imagines her perfect ending, riding off with her prince. Notice how she rides off to a castle literally in the clouds? Hello, she's on her way to heaven. And in our number 1 spot, we have the Angel of Death. This theory revolves around the film Peter Pan, Peter being the Angel of Death. Theory goes that Peter comes and takes the souls of dying children. He then takes their hand and guides them to heaven, aka Neverland. Now, this explains why the Lost Boys and other kids in Neverland don't grow up. It's because they are already dead, which is pretty sad if you ask me. This also means that Wendy commits a murder-suicide by killing herself and her brothers since they all go to Neverland with Peter. Now, author of Peter Pan, J.M. Barrie, created this land for his brother that passed away at 13. So the theory about Neverland being for dead kids is kind of true. Starting off this countdown, we have the murderer. In Wreck-It Ralph, we learn that Calhoun, voiced by Jane Lynch, is the way that she is because of her programmed tragic backstory. Basically, on Calhoun's wedding day, a cybug burst into the church and ate her husband. Calhoun defends herself and her wedding guests by shooting the cybug. But what we eventually learn is that cybugs turn into whatever they eat, meaning it would have turned into her husband. Meaning Calhoun shot and killed her own husband. The cybugs aren't to blame for this one. Calhoun viciously murdered her husband. Unintentionally, that is. Or was it? Moving on to number 9, we have Boo the Brave. So there's a huge theory out there that attempts to prove that all Pixar movies are related in some way. Part of this theory argues that Boo from Monsters, Inc. is in fact the witch from Brave. I know it seems wild right now, but just hear me out. So first off, Brave takes place hundreds of years before Monsters, Inc. Monsters, Inc. takes place in the future when humans don't exist anymore. It's theorized that the monsters use the doors to go back in time to a child's house to collect their energy. Meanwhile, in Brave, we see that the witch magically disappears when she goes through doorways. Just like the scarers from Monsters, Inc. do. So theory goes that Boo couldn't forget about Sully. She missed him so much that when she grew up, she harnessed magic and figured out how to teleport through doors. She then teleports through these doors in an attempt to stumble across Sully again. So the witch in Brave is is Boo, who teleported back in time. Don't believe me? In the witch's workshop, there's a carving of Sully there. How would she carve this if she has never even met him before? Another theory is that all the Easter eggs in every Pixar movie were actually left as a trail by Boo to help Sully find her. Coming in at number 8, we have the Mother Killer. In a very sad opening scene in Bambi, we see Bambi's mom get killed by a hunter. Well, fans have come up with the theory that Bambi's mom was killed by Gaston from Beauty and the Beast. For starters, we know he's a hunter. Then we have the fact that a deer is shown in the opening scene of Beauty and the Beast. Could that be Bambi's mom? And then shortly after, we see a deer's head that looks very similar to Bambi's mom mounted on the wall of the pub that Gaston drinks at. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe Gaston killed poor young Bambi's mom. In our 7th spot, we have the Frozen Shining. One fan is convinced that Frozen was basically inspired by the horror movie The Shining. They argue that there's just too many similarities between the two films. For starters, the main characters in both movies are a danger to their family, Elsa in Frozen and Jack in The Shining. Then we have the fact that both the characters' personalities begin to change after being isolated in a giant building located in a cold, desolate area. And Elsa at one point in the film literally almost kills her sister. So I'm thinking another Shining needs to be filmed, this time starring Elsa. Moving on to number 6, we have the Prediction. It's crazy how life as we know it changed right before our eyes. Like in a flash, the virus was just spreading worldwide and we got locked down. Nothing could have prepared us for this. A warning would have been nice. But it may just be that Disney knew exactly what was going to happen to us. The movie Tangled is said to have predicted this outbreak. So in the film, Rapunzel is locked away in a tower with her mother. The town Rapunzel is isolated from is literally named Corona. So it's thought that the town of Corona represents the pandemic, and Rapunzel symbolizes everyone having to self-isolate. First the Simpsons are predicting the future, and now Disney? We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with the incest. Okay. This next theory is going to change the way you look at this film forever. So, Lion King. We all know that Simba and Nala end up together and have kids. Here's the thing. In real life, in a lion pride, you have one male lion that sleeps with all the female lions. So Simba and Nala might have different moms, but Mufasa might just be both their dads, meaning they're half siblings. Woo, yikes. Which makes sense why Scar hated his brother so much and wanted to overthrow him. It's because he was the loser brother that didn't get any. Then when Simba takes his place as king of Pride Rock, well, he won't be loyal to Nala. He's gonna be getting it on with all the other lady lions. In fact, this was one of Disney's concerns. In the original draft of The Lion King, it was implied that Nala's father was in fact Mufasa, but that was cut out to avoid the incest. But still, in our 4th spot, we have the drug epidemic. So this next theory has to deal with the film Zootopia. So towards the end of the movie, warning, spoilers ahead, it is revealed that the assistant mayor, a white sheep, has been an evil mastermind all along. She has been infecting animal predators with a serum from night howlers, which makes them regain their predator instincts and become violent again. Well, people claim that this plot is very similar to the 1980s drug epidemic in America. Basically, there's a conspiracy saying that the CIA intentionally introduced cocaine into minority groups, mainly black neighborhoods. This was done to get people to turn against them in fear, stereotyping them as bad people. In the movie Zootopia, the predators are the minority. She introduces the drug into their groups, and she uses the predators' pre-existing stereotypes to then turn the population against them. Yeah, that's an eerie connection. Coming in at number 3, we have Snow White's drugs. Snow White is another Disney film that may be all about drug use, particularly the use of cocaine. For starters, Snow White is another name for cocaine. Then we have the 7 dwarves like Happy, Grumpy, Sneezy, and Dopey. Would you look at that? Those are all potential side effects of doing cocaine. Then we have Doc. Continual cocaine use will most likely end up with you seeing a doctor. The movie is about cocaine use. Confirmed. In our second spot, we have the Slayer. So in part 1 of this video series, I explained how Peter Pan is literally an angel of death. He escorts children to Neverland, which is basically a heaven. But this theory just got 10 times darker. So there's a new theory that Peter Pan has killed countless lost boys. I mean, if he keeps bringing kids to Neverland, you would think he would have tons of lost boys in his group. So now, let's take a look at what the author of Peter Pan had to say about his book. He said, and I quote, "The boys on the island vary of course in numbers, according as they get killed and so on. And when they seem to be growing up, which is against the rules, Peter thins them out." Excuse me? What did you say? Thins them out? Yeah, Peter Pan kills them once they start aging. He's literally a murderer. And in our number 1 spot, we have the mourning. Ever notice how a lot of characters in Disney movies are lacking mothers? Bambi's mom gets killed, and Belle, Ariel, and Jasmine, and many other Disney princesses and characters don't have mothers. Why is this? Well, theory goes that this is due to the fact that Walt Disney was still mourning over the loss of his own mother. She died from asphyxiation from a gas leak from her furnace. Walt felt responsible for the death of his mother because this incident occurred in the house Walt bought for his parents. He felt so guilty that he couldn't even bring himself to put mother figures in his own movies. That is so sad.
Now let's start with number 10, Winnie the Pooh characters. The first theory on our list comes from an article published in the Canadian Medical Association Journal, so pretty legit. And also, it's one of my longer forays into the material I'm studying, so buckle up. In 2000, Sarah Shea from the Division of Developmental Pediatrics at Dalhousie University wrote an article with her colleagues. This article journeys through diagnosing each of the main characters of Winnie the Pooh with different states of neurological disorders. I'm gonna give you the highlights of what the article alleges because it kind of goes in really deep. First, the title character, Winnie the Pooh, himself, they say, has ADHD, or Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, and OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. Second, the study says that Piglet has generalized anxiety disorder, which accounts for his anxious, blustering, and flustered demeanor. Third, it says that Eeyore has chronic dysthymia, or another way of saying he has persistent mild depression, and they say this explains his negative outlook. Next, it continues to say that Owl is bright, but dyslexic. And then finally, when it comes to Tigger, the article isn't final on anything, but they try to say his behaviors are hyperactive and impulsive. This article theorizes more about possible treatment plans for even more characters, and the ones listed above, it goes into even more detail. Plus, other people online have shared other arguments for what characters represent with different diagnoses, but I could deep dive on this one theory honestly for a full 10 minutes, but we have other things to do here, and we're only on number 10 of our list, and we need to keep going. On to number 9. Frozen, Kristoff, and Sven. So let's jump to a more recent Disney production, Frozen. In Frozen, we see Kristoff in warm clothes to keep cozy in the cold climate of Arendelle, and this makes sense. People harvest ice in this movie titled Frozen, so it's bound to be cold. That's not where this conspiracy theory is. We need to take a closer look at Kristoff's wardrobe, then to his adorable reindeer sidekick, Sven, then back to his wardrobe. See anything? Any similarities? There is a theory that Kristoff wears Sven's mom's pelt, wears it as it. Ice harvesters in Arendelle see this orphan Kristoff in blistering cold weather, so they dress him in the tanned hide of a reindeer. But these theories are suggesting that this reindeer hide is Sven's mom, because Sven doesn't have a mother in the movie either. Is Sven just a reindeer so he doesn't notice, or has Kristoff convinced him otherwise? It's something to think about, people, honestly. But anyways, on to number 8, Fairly Odd Parents. Now, this show aired both on Nickelodeon and Disney XD, so it makes the list of Disney theories. Plus, it's too interesting to skip, so good enough reason for me. What this theory suggests is that Timmy's fairies in the show are metaphors for antidepressants. Now, stick with me. The evidence people use is that they arrived when his problems began, then that they are only around when he needs them, as in needing them to balance out the chemical imbalance in his brain. There was also a moment in the episode Channel Chasers when it was mentioned that they would be around for a long time, like him using them for a long time. Importantly, there are side effects when he abuses his wishing powers, just like there are side effects for abusing prescription drugs for mental health illnesses. This might get you thinking about what the other fairies represent as well, so if you think of anything cool, just let me know in a comment. I want to hear it. Number 7. Calhoun from Wreck-It Ralph. Sergeant Calhoun from Wreck-It Ralph was a badass, no doubt. But there's an element of her backstory that I looked into that may give you some pause if you're thinking of putting her on a pedestal or something. On her wedding day, Calhoun's soon-to-be husband Brad was eaten by a cybug. The thing is, cybugs turn into what they eat. So, when the sergeant was firing at the creature and we don't see the beast itself, only Calhoun's face, the reality is she may have been shooting at a cybug with Brad's face on it. And that's some emotional trauma even Fix-It Felix can't touch. Number 6. Captain Hook and Ariel. Peter Pan came out in 1953 and brought with it the notorious pirate character Captain Hook. Already the villain in his own story, could he be the villain in another? Hitting fast forward over 50 years later, The Little Mermaid, Ariel's Beginning comes out. It's a prequel to the 1989 classic and has Disney theorists bringing out that red string. The prequel revealed that Ariel's mom, Queen Athena, had been killed by pirates. And you see where I'm going with this? This is backed up by the fact that in a lagoon, we saw a bunch of mermaids, including a red-headed mermaid that looked pretty familiar in Peter Pan. So, could Hook be the leader of the crew of pirates that killed Queen Athena? Have you seen the hook on his hand? Like, I think he could do it. He's a pirate. Now, number 5. Peter Pan. Sticking to the movie Captain Hook is in, let's switch to examine Peter Pan himself. Now, this theory doesn't line up with the last one, so really, if you like this one, it kind of invalidates the last one, so you have to pick which one you believe. This one needs some history with it, so we need to get all on the same page. Peter Pan the movie is based off J.M. Barrie's titular character in the play of the same name that came out in 1904, and on the book Peter and Wendy that came out a little later in 1911. Barrie also lost his brother when his brother was only 13, so people think this may be where he got the idea of never growing up. So where does this leave Peter Pan? The theory is that he is the angel of death and that Neverland is a form of afterlife. Pulling Captain Hook into this, the pirate could be seen as the devil if you look into this as a depiction of hell in the Christian sense, is what some people have been saying, but I have my own idea about Peter Pan as the angel of death that you can stick around here at the end of the video, but my own conspiracy theory spiral will have to wait, so let's skip that and jump to a princess movie next. Number 4. Prince Charming from Snow White. When you think Prince Charming, you think the classic embodiment of everything a princess should want, but in Snow White, this character may not be what he seems. Matt Morgan, a commentator on a BuzzFeed article, equated Prince Charming to the Grim Reaper. He listed a bunch of parallels. The first time Snow White sees Prince Charming, she is scared and nearly falls into a well and dies, mimicking a fear of death. 2. Her next brush with death is a poison apple, and then this prince comes riding in on a pale white horse. At the time of the movie's release, coming in on a pale white horse was a depiction of what Death rode himself. Then 3. The kiss of death. Death kissing Snow White to literally take the breath of life from her. Death as in the prince. And yeah, there's more. Do you remember Snow White and the prince riding off into a castle that was surrounded by clouds and golden light? And the dwarfs didn't follow them, instead they said goodbye? Well, that's because Morgan's theory states that the living can't follow them into heaven or a heavenly looking afterlife. So there's a dead princess theory for you. Now, it's time to switch gears. And when I say gears, I mean number 3, we're talking about cars. If you're familiar with the Pixar theory that all movies are connected, you and others will realize that there's a problem with the theory when it comes to the movie Cars. In the reality of Cars, it's a world without humans. The theory is that the human race in the future is wiped out, possibly murdered, and that cars have gained sentience. If you think this one is a little wild, don't think it's too far out there. Screen Crush interviewed Cars creative director Jay Ward, and his theory lines up. Ward theorized that Cars took over with their advanced AI and then adopted the personalities of their previous owners, took over and adopted the personalities, like, no thank you. So let's check out another theory set in the future. This one's number 2, Aladdin. Now there's quite a few theories on Aladdin, but this one floating around the internet is that it's set in a post-apocalyptic future. This theory hinges on the fact that Genie wasn't in the lamp before the 3rd century, as it uses a line from the movie to back up its claims. Genie says Aladdin's clothes are much too 3rd century, therefore he wouldn't have been in the lamp at that time. He would have been just roaming around. That time for us is the year 300 in the Common Era, which is over 1700 years ago. The thing is, Genie mentions he's been stuck in the lamp for over 10,000 years, which moves our timeline way forward. So Agrabah could be a post-apocalyptic society that goes back to not using technology and could have been inspired by old ways. Finally, this theory is also backed up up by the fact that Genie makes countless references to the 20th century, and while you might tie that to the fact it's a movie that came out in 1992, I say keep to continuity. And now for the most tragic and scary theory of them all. Number 1. Carl from Up. We all know I cried at the beginning of Up. Before anything bad actually happened, the movie had me in tears. But this theory just makes it all worse. I'm just gonna say it. What if Carl was dead the entire time? When I say the entire time, I mean once he is 78 years old after the tragic montage of waterfalling tears. The theory starts when Carl decides to follow his lifelong dream of going to Paradise Falls. His balloon equation is impossible, so this theory ventures to explain that by saying all of his experiences were symbolic and he was already dead by this point. They say his trip to Paradise Falls is a journey of acceptance guided by a guardian angel, wilderness explorer Russell. When they make it back to the city, it's also a symbolic meaning of making it back into heaven. Now within this, there's also a sub-theory that says Charles Muntz is a fallen angel selling hellhounds, the talking dogs, to drag Carl into the underworld. And so do with that one what you do. And well, that's the top 10 I have for you today. And what do you think? Which ones do you think hold some merit and which ones are you not so sure about? If there's one you want me to dive into more, or one I didn't even talk about or touch on, just let me know. If you like the topic of Disney, let me know if you want to see what is rumored to be scary about Disneyland or Disney World, or also let me know your favorite Disney movie, because I want to have a movie marathon soon and I want to hear your recommendations. My favorite Disney movie is Tangled, and it's hard to change my mind, but you can try if you want to argue with me on that one. Oh, also, at the beginning of the video I said stick around for my theories, so let's start with that Peter Pan one, aka Angel of Death one. What I was thinking was that it might draw closer to Greek mythology. Hook would be more of a Hades character, ruler of the underworld, because Neverland would be the underworld in this case. Tinkerbell could be Charon or Charon, the ferryman that guided souls across the river Styx, or even take the word ferryman. Ferry like the boat ferry, or ferry like the Tinkerbell ferry, what I'm saying? And so where does that leave our boy Peter Pan? Peter Pan would be seen as Hermes, and Hermes isn't just a god that delivers dead souls to Charon, which in itself mirrors Peter Pan getting Tinkerbell's help to bring people to Neverland. Hermes, among other things, is also a god of trickery. Peter Pan, that's all I'm saying. So that's my Peter Pan one. And I have one more, last one, just squeezing it in there, that I think that you maybe should think about with Aladdin. Maybe the timeline isn't as wild as that theory suggests. What if, instead of Agrabah being way in the future, the genie is bound to a different form of time, like a time traveler, eh? What do you think? Maybe? Yes? No?